Morning all. Thanks for joining us here today. So we're here to take on the topic of sovereignty and data ownership. So a nice light start to 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. But we're joined by the best in the business to talk about this topic and really unpack what it means here today. So look, as you know, we're at the intersection of all of these powerful forces: sovereignty, decentralization, trust, AI. But it's not always clear how they're going to mesh and how it's all going to come together. So I'm very welcome to be joined on stage by three true experts in their respective fields. And I might just start by asking you all to introduce yourselves. So Bettina, if you go first.
Sure, thanks so much. I'm Bettina Warburg. I've been in the Web3 blockchain space since 2013, 2014, early days when Dom and I were both in Silicon Valley. And I'm an investor and advisor and work primarily now at the intersection of Web3 and AI, but also from a perspective of how do we capture and preserve societal knowledge over time.
Great. And Jan?
Yeah, I guess, was it an intro question for me?
Yes. Introduce
really hard
yourself
to
for
hear.
you in the room who might not know who you are.
Yeah, I'm Jan. I'm a CTO at the DFINITY Foundation. It's been 7 years now, so it's a long time, a very exciting time. Of course, thinking very much about this question about sovereignty, decentralization, privacy, data protection. Actually, like data protection, privacy, sovereignty really has been, because my whole entire professional career, really 30 years thinking about these topics, and very happy with what we have built now today on the internet computer and how well it's suited to address all these big challenges.
Great. And Carla, if you could introduce yourself as well.
Yes, so my name is Carla. My company, Phoenix Technologies, which I founded 7 years ago, is focusing on frontier technology. We're at the intersection between AI, blockchain, and quantum computing. We are a local player, so we're really focused on the Swiss market, and we provide infrastructure. So basically running 6 data centers in Switzerland, specifically for clients who do not want to have exposure to foreign countries. So mainly banks, governments, insurances, health data, these kind of things. Everything that is really critical. Even foreign countries store the data in Switzerland for some reason. I guess because the country is very stable and the legislation is quite transparent. So we've been building that for quite some time, and you can imagine that the recent global developments have boosted our company massively. So it's going well right now.
Great. And you've touched on it there. I mean, we are living in a time of data leaks, geopolitical tension, AI. So I might start with each of you with what seems like a simple question, but what does data and digital sovereignty truly mean to you, Bettina?
I mean, sovereignty, we've had the sort of Westphalian version of it for quite a long time, focused around nation states. I think when you move outside of sort of the territorial and nation state concept, you can start talking about the need in the digital sphere to have access and basically be able to prove and access, I would say, 3 things. One is identity, and that could be our own identities as individuals, our ability to differentiate between ourselves as humans and AIs or agents, but also the data that makes up sort of content-wise who you are in the digital world. So having access and being able to prove those things. I'd say the second one is knowledge. We are in a world where having access to knowledge and proving that knowledge correctly or verifying it is increasingly important. And if you can't do that, you are going to be left behind or just not be able to participate with autonomy. And certainly that's true of AI and increasingly true of just how do we sort of think about knowledge flows and how that's mediated. And then the third one is assets, which we are all pretty familiar with in this space. But I think, goes beyond just, can you access and prove which assets are yours, or which assets you're interacting with, but also how do you guarantee that you can participate in the economic flows of the future. So increasingly, that's like the trifecta I think about in terms of digital sovereignty. If you have interference with your ability to make decisions in each of those arenas, then you can't really participate in the future. And I'll put out a sort of straw man, which is, you can think about maybe like an Altman trifecta version of this, right? If you combine OpenAI and WorldCoin, you do have all three of those. So I think increasingly we want to think about, to have a marketplace, what are the alternatives? We want modular, we want composable architectures that do give us sort of a different concept of sovereignty.
Absolutely. And Jan, you mentioned this has been a huge focus of your work over the last number of decades, but I know that decentralization, as you know, is a term that means a lot of things to a lot of different people. So maybe you can talk about the importance of that definition and how you view it.
Right, I guess decentralization sort of came up really with like Bitcoin, where nobody's really in control, right? I see it somewhat differently, right? Because to me, decentralization is much less like a grassroots movement than like a means to achieve like secure systems, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if there's a single party who's in control, actually you have a problem, because like that single party could fail or could be malicious and whatnot, right? So in order to build a secure system, to actually be the foundation for digital sovereignty, you need to be in control of your data, and you need to make sure that nobody else can, like take your data or hack your data. So, you have to have control yourself, but also like, it needs to be secure. And so, in order to do that, you need like a decentralized system, if you want, where actually you decentralize control, right? But that doesn't mean that everybody in their dog has a say in all these systems. It just means that you have to have sufficiently many parties in joint custody, if you want, right? And so that as long as a good bunch of them are doing their job, you can trust them, then you're good. So I think that's really important to distinguish, like, how much decentralization you need, and like what's the goal here, right? And to a lot of people say it's not decentralized if not everybody can have a say, everybody can do it, but actually that also, when you talk about data sovereignty, right? If you put the data on such a system and everybody can run it, actually then also you don't have sovereign control over your data anymore. So this is a bit of a trade-off there in how much decentralization you really want and how can you achieve digital sovereignty.
And to maybe stay with you, Jan, on the topic of sovereignty, you might want to talk to us a little bit about the work of DFINITY and Utopia and what that means in terms of a paradigm shift in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a question I could talk on for hours, but I'll try to not do that just right now. Yeah, if you think about it, like what does it mean to have digital sovereignty? It really means that you are in control of your data, how your data is treated, where your data go, how to compute on your data, and all the applications that you use, right? It's no, I mean, data by itself is sort of dead unless you can do stuff with it. So it's also like data and compute. Now, a few of you might remember like 20 years ago when social networks came, right? And like people were crying, like, oh, now it's all personal data on Facebook or Orkut or whatever these guys were called. And then they said, look, actually we do a decentralized network. Everybody just runs their own server where they have their data, and then actually can talk to other people. Like very much, I mean, like decentralized, again, like a system. But of course, nobody could do that because nobody could run their own systems and so on and so forth, because just like complex, right? And actually the technology, the legacy stack has become more and more complex, increasingly insecure because it wasn't built for the way we use it today. And that even means even enterprises who were able to maybe run their own server and protect their data don't do that anymore. They put it out in the cloud under control. I guess here mostly American software, other parts of the world, maybe other software like whatever, Huawei Cloud, whatever there is. And I guess what blockchain though has shown that actually you can build a secure system from a protocol that cannot be hacked, right? And so on the one hand, now we know how to build a secure system. In principle, that's what we've done with the inner computer. To build the inner computer, just a secure computer built from a protocol. But actually now, for the first time, like people can actually write their software, put it on there, have control over their data, because like the protocol cannot be hacked, and this builds such that now you own your data, you own your programs. Now, of course, it's a public network, right? And maybe you don't want as an enterprise, you want to have more control, right? Because it's maybe too decentralized, because like too many people who run their network that you don't have control of. So that's why I guess Utopia is like an initiative that we do at the foundation, where actually we also enable enterprise to have their own version of the inner computers. You can just, I mean, it's just a protocol. You can run it wherever you want. You can also run it on your own servers. Again, make sure it's decentralized. You don't have like one system admin that runs everything, but like you have like several people who then run, like operate like one server, another guy operates another server, so they're separate, so you don't have a single point of failure. And actually, then it's actually very amazing what you can do, because certainly get rid of insider attacks, because it's a protocol from the very like hardware level up to all the application level. So, like in today's system, a system admin at the company has like access to all the system, even though if you have a compliance systems and all of that on top of it, the system admin just, goes in there, changes things, runs away with the money, and actually like the costly cyber crimes or insider attacks, right? And with Utopia, like a system built on a protocol, application built on a protocol, you can prevent that, because it's all protocol action. It can encode now all these compliance rules or like workflows for upgrades of systems, like in that. And actually, for the first time, actually have a system where you can, as a company, again, be sovereign of your data. Same for individuals as well.
Great. And Carla, I know a lot of those topics are very close to you in your work in Phoenix Technologies. I mean, we've got servers, sovereignty, security. You might just talk about the importance of geography and infrastructure when you're trying to achieve such lofty ambitions with things like sovereign and data security.
Well, I think many countries today are really reflecting on a sovereign infrastructure. All governments discuss sovereign solutions, not only in terms of data centers, but also in terms of AI, to increase efficiency, right? And there's been in general, I think all of us had this moment when Donald Trump started to do this tariff discussion, that all of us suddenly started to think, well, how can I reduce my exposure to American products in general? And then you think about, okay, which products from America am I really consuming? And then you rather quickly come to the fact that technology is mainly dominated by American products. And then you think, well, there's no alternative. There's just, well, there are, but they're all a bit more painful and all a bit, how to say, well, you have to really work in order to get there, right? So I think geography, so the sovereignty discussion really helps to create local infrastructure. But then it also, the question is then, do we really need to reinvent everything ourselves? I'm not quite sure. Honestly, I don't think it's so much about geography right now than more about energy. Energy, right? In order to have sovereign infrastructure, you need good energy sources and cheap energy sources. So even if you build data centers locally, it doesn't mean that you are sovereign, because the energy is potentially not local. So it's a difficult setup to really get independent and sovereign in all aspects. So really from the infrastructure perspective. From the data perspective, I think there are proven concepts that allow you to be sovereign on a data level. Confidential computing, there are many companies that are very modular, in the sense that you can bring your own keys. You can really create infrastructures where no one else has access except you. This is called a trusted execution environment. This exists, and the solutions are there, and this is established. So I think it's achievable. Now, when you, again, are dependent on American companies, there's this US Cloud Act. This really disturbs me a lot. So I don't know if all of you know what the US Cloud Act really entails. It means that actually every company that is somehow affiliated to an American company submits to the US Cloud Act. And it also says that the US government and all its agencies is allowed to see and download all your data, including your AI data, your LLMs, your agents, everything. And they don't even have to tell you that they did look at it and that they did take all of it. So this is a tough nut to crack.
Yeah. And I know, Bettina, you're doing lots of work on the kind of government and policy side of things. How poignant is this challenge around jurisdiction and this tension between maybe what seems to be more of a European desire to own data versus maybe a more laissez-faire attitude in the States when it comes to personal data?
I mean, I actually think some of the most interesting questions in this space are around like what happens to everyone else. And so I'm an advisor on a project. It's the Digital Parliaments Project that's being run by PopVox Foundation, which is a US philanthropic nonprofit. And they are essentially looking at how do you help many governments digitize, modernize, and become AI ready. And a lot of these countries, I mean, the first example they're doing is a regional effort in the Caribbean. They're thinking about sovereignty, just like Carla's saying, as sort of there's also trade-offs. They're not going to be a massive energy producer. They're not going to necessarily have all of the talent needed to replicate an entire tech stack internally. So you're getting many different versions of, what does pooled sovereignty look like? Singapore has been sort of taking the lead in figuring out how to create local, a localized version of. They based it on Llama originally, but now they've used other models underneath to basically have it's called Sea Lion, Southeast Asian languages in one network. And so they've customized it to basically reflect cultural differences and, local language across Southeast Asia, which has many different languages, without actually going and replicating the whole foundation model and training. Now that has limitations, and I think ultimately many countries do want their own foundation models, and there are efforts around that as well. We're seeing AI Sweden and Swiss AI, and a number of different efforts. Playas in France is working on some of that. So there's, I think, this opportunity to figure out how do you pool resources in places where it makes sense. How do you create, very nationally sovereign parts of the tech stack, depending on what kind of threat model you have. So we're seeing sort of different efforts, I would say, globally. But it's an important time to then say, what are the really amazing infrastructure that we can supply that is either neutral or allows that kind of customization, for countries, for companies, for communities of different shapes and sizes.
Absolutely. And yeah, and I know in the conversations that you're having with governments and institutions, that opening conversation is really helping them to figure out what their need is and how you can ensure that it's bespoke. When you're talking to government entities seeking a sovereign solution, what are the type of initial fears or challenges that they're presenting, and how are you helping them to overcome that?
Yeah, maybe let me quickly catch or tie into this geography legislation
Yes.
question, because you mentioned, right, Cloud Act. So I think geography really, maybe in terms of what legislation, things are. And if you have like a decentralized protocol, right, and now of course it depends where those nodes run, right? If you have like a node running in the US, and now, then of course it means like your data is just accessible by law there, right? And so I guess that's like one place where actually you need to feel, where geography really plays a role, because like if you want to provide a secure service, and it, the security also depends on the legislation on where those node providers, those running your protocol actually reside, right? Yeah, and so for instance, on the internet computer, we have like a network, a subnet that just is only nodes in Europe. We're going to do one in this node in America, stuff like that, right? So that you're sure that your data stays in those regions and is not subject to some of those laws. So that's one point. And the other point, again, going back to decentralization, like why do we decentralize? It's really about distributing control to avoid single point of failures. But then, like, you also want to make sure that not all of them fail, right? So you want to give some incentives that these people don't fail, don't do bad stuff, right? And now there's different approaches here in the industry. There's a lot of like proof of stake. It's somehow tried to tie to value that people would lose, which actually, in my view, is a very failed approach in the sense that, if you want to like fulfill the vision that we have, really run all of the world software on a network like that, how can you possibly, put down enough value there, because that doesn't exist, right? Because the world hopefully is more valuable than what you have to put down there, right? So you necessarily have to tie into legal systems, make sure this. And that's how the real world works, right? I mean, if you do stuff you shouldn't do, then you end up in jail. And so that's also where now location is very important, because if you run some of those nodes, provide some service in geographies, legislation, where actually you can't figure out like who did it, there's no like enforcement, you're bad, right? As like you can't provide like a secure service, right? Okay, so now to your question about, like, yeah, I think it's very much on people's mind, right? We have also for Utopia a couple of pilots now. We have like a pilot in Cambodia where they want to do like it's called universal credentials, but really it's about enabling micro SMEs to get hook them up with banks and identity, all of that. And of course, they want to run that on like a secure system, right? And so that's why they came and talked to us, because they worry about that, right? And so we have more. There's a couple of pilots running. Actually, very excited, but people really are worried about the Cloud Computing Act. How can I run my infrastructure? Of course, it's very tough, because what you mentioned, but like or because also the panel before, but like where does your silicon come from? Because like, we all know, right? If your computer is not done in your country, or even then, like some secret services might put in some extra chips that allow to read it. So of course, overall, it's like a very, very difficult problem. We're facing now the today's world where you have to think more about that. So I expect to have like chip productions coming up in Switzerland or European countries, because you want to back the controls, and you need to have it end to end, right? Like from the very low level hardware to the whole software stack. So it's gonna hugely challenging, but like let's work on it.
Absolutely. And Carla, you mentioned the complexity and just how much facets go into the work that you do. Is there an education journey for more traditional institutions and governments to help them understand how this network of nodes works? And, are they eager to understand it, or do they just want to know what it does for their business or their government?
So I think in terms of education, we should start really at the beginning. Like, it needs to be part of the public education system. So it already needs to start in primary school, like when kids start to have their phones, so that they get to understand what happens with the data wherever they put it. Like, right. It's going to cost a lot of money. Most people just don't care. It's also so interesting, this debate we have in Switzerland about digital identity that is governed by the state. Everybody freely gives pictures, information, everything to all the social media platforms. But the Swiss government, ooh, beware. This is big brothers watching you, right? So I think there's this perspective of people that everything that is official is different from everything that is social media, and they are quite carefree with their social media data as opposed to their official data, right? But actually should be the opposite.
Yeah.
And so you really see quite a big distortion between perception and reality. So educating the broader public on this. I mean, let's say we here are all in a bubble. We are interested by the subject, but I promise you, 98% of population just simply doesn't care. So this is going to be a major effort, and it's going to cost a lot of money. And unless the public authorities do that, I don't see how this is going to happen.
And to pick up on that, Bettina, like, we know, as you say, there's a perception that people are very happy to give away their data. If it's like a value exchange, they're very happy to get social media. How do we get people to begin to treat their personal data the same way they would their personal finances, and treat it with a level of at least thought, if not care, in the first instance?
I think Carla's right. It's most people care about convenience, and expecting some dramatic rise in the care level around data is, not necessarily, we shouldn't be very optimistic about that. But I think, part of it is looking out at what is coming down the pipeline. If we're actually headed towards a world where everybody has their own agent, or we have an internet of agents, and sort of all, the level of agentic tech, or even just the development of, from AI to AGI, or, where we are trajectory wise, I think, there's some offloading of some of those tasks that I think from a user interface and experience perspective, that is a more reasonable bet to make, is to say, well, actually, you're not going to be caring that much more, but your agent will care on your behalf for those things. Or, and that gets to a weird problem that I don't think anybody's really thought about, because I've heard a lot of, especially from the Web3 plus AI world, people sort of sell this vision, and, nobody deals with terms of service. So the idea that somebody is going to sit there and determine what an agent will or won't do on their behalf is sort of like saying, well, now you're asking people not just to be, interested in their data, but they're going to be a lawyer, and they're going to be a this and a that. So I think, we are going to have to offload some of that to agents, and have actual templates and frameworks for understanding their capabilities in a reasonable and sort of trusted way. Otherwise, you have major sort of user experience issues along the way, and it doesn't really offload the task.
Or we end up with agents deciding what permissions you give to different agents, and
sure, or you
convenience wins.
Proxy world that exists. That's it's not clear how it ties back to people and their wishes, or nations potentially.
Absolutely. And Jan, if I'll go to you to close with a topic that I know is relevant to many people in the room, and it's around if and when you achieve this vision of true decentralization, what will become of the biggest cloud providers, in the world? Do they evolve? Do they adapt? Do they partner? Dare I say, do they die? What's your view on it to take us out here?
I think that's a very easy question, because they would all run ICP, the Internet Computer Protocol, right?
They will partner with DFINITY. Absolutely. And do you see this as evolution or revolution in terms of timeline in your mind, and how long this is going to take?
Of course, I think it's a, like running everything on a protocol is a different tech stack, right? And sort of actually, like today's infrastructure is well built very differently. I mean, starting from like the social networks that we just discussed, or I sort of agree or disagree with what Carla was saying, but it's like people don't have a choice, right? Because people don't have a choice to put their data in the cloud because it's too expensive. People don't have a choice to do that. I don't think they're happy about doing that. Or if you explain people what the possibilities are, there's no choice, right? I guess if all your friends are on WhatsApp and they want, either you're excluded and don't make it to the parties, or you use it, right? Do you have a choice? And but I think with the internet computer, also what we gonna explain later on with caffeine, where actually AI helps you to build your own application. Actually, I see a huge chance there actually that we can get back control, right? Because now with AI, everybody can write their own apps, host it themselves, get back control of your data. With enterprise can do the same. but it will take a while, right? Because as an enterprise or as a user, right? I mean, like, again, if everybody's on WhatsApp, you're not just gonna do another application and ask your friends to join it. Like, that's gonna happen very fast. Same for enterprises, right? Like, you have to make money, you have to run the systems, and unless you're really at a huge risk that your systems get broken, then you don't port it. Of course, you will start to do little applications. Maybe you start to manage your crypto on a network like that, or really like your high security data. So step after step, but we will get there.
Absolutely. And with that, we've the first real mention of caffeine today. Lots more to come, and we know you're all hotly anticipating those updates. But for now, thank you to Jan, Carla, and Bettina, and thank you all for listening.